Hello, my name is Thais Campanac, and I'm a part of CMU's GenCyber Campanac, and I'm a part of CMU's GenCyber x picoCTF. And this workshop is all about understanding computer forensics. And since this is a recording of a workshop, usually I would stop and ask if there's any questions or if there's anything that is confusing. But since this is a recording, can't really do that. So if I say anything technical, hopefully that you can go back to the other videos that we've made on this channel talking about computer science and about cybersecurity, and hopefully that'll help you. I'll try my best to be very thorough throughout this entire workshop. So let's get started. So first, in order to understand computer forensics, we need to first define what computer forensics is. And my favorite definition comes from CISA, and in which they define computer forensics as the discipline that combines elements of law and computer science to collect and analyze data from computer systems, networks, wireless communications, and storage devices in a way that is admissible as evidence in a court of law. So first and foremost, this is a lot. This is a very long definition, but we can divide this definition in three parts in order to tell us the entire story of computer forensics. So the first part is basically telling us what domain computer forensics falls under. The second part says, what does computer forensic specialists do? And then the third part says, what is the outcome of these investigations that we do? Another part of this definition that we need to keep in mind is the idea of data. What is data and what is evidence? So the data we can define as is the information that is stored on a device or is collected by the network. So this can be your browser history, files, folders created, videos, photos taken, saved, transmitted, any communications like email, text messages, phone calls, social media exchanges. All of this can be considered as data and can eventually become evidence within computer forensics. So now that you've gotten a brief overview of computer forensics, now we are in this question of, okay, so we know what computer forensics is. How did we get to this point? Well, it all started off in the 1980s with the invention of the personal computer. This allowed us to have access to technology in general. In addition to that, we also gotten the internet. That became a public service at that point. And with the combination of both the internet and personal devices, we open ourselves up to, yes, communication and advanced knowledge about technology, but it also became the frontier of cyber crimes, and it opened us to the malware and the cyber attacks, because the only necessary constraint for these two technologies is basically the capital to buy and connect to the internet. So since we have cyber crimes starting to happen, or the utilization of technology within crimes, law enforcement needed a system in order to investigate these devices. And by devices, it originally meant like personal computers, servers, storage devices, and handheld electronic devices. But now, with the invention of like the Ring doorbell, printers accessing the internet, refrigerators accessing the internet, cars accessing the internet, now we are expanding to the Internet of Things. And these are all the previous examples that I gave. These are all a part of the Internet of Things. So we can basically describe as tech that is not our traditional devices, but can still connect to the internet. So why is computer science and computer forensics important? Not computer science. Why is it important? Well, it's used in multiple different areas. First and foremost, criminal investigations, as I've mentioned before, but not only cyber crimes like cyberbullying and hacking, but it also can be used in our physical crimes. So if you use your phone, if let's say the criminal used their phone during a robbery or a kidnapping, we can utilize that evidence during our investigations. We can also utilize computer forensics during civil litigations. Let's say we find photos of infidelity on a phone, for instance. This can help within your divorce settlement. Another thing we can use computer forensics for is basically understanding who owns what intellectual property and prove whether these properties have been stolen. And the last two are the most common, besides criminal investigations, of course, are other very common ideas of where computer forensics is utilized, which is during your corporate security, meaning whenever you join a company of any kind, or even a school, you have a set of standards for security. And if that is breached, we should be able to find out who breached our standards. And of course, computer forensics is used during national securities. If anything has threatened national security, we can use our computer forensics skills for. To continue on of why do we have computer forensics? So first and foremost, it's to capture evidence or vital information to prove that a crime has taken place and eventually prosecute the criminal. But also we can use computer forensics in a different way. We can say that we use computer forensics as a way to not lose vital information, also to prove that we are protecting data and we can't be liable for certain data to come out, saying for which medical companies have to follow HIPAA procedures and protect data. We can prove that that data is protected through computer forensics. And of course, overall, computer forensics can help us ensure integrity and survivability of our overall system. That's what CISA would say. So the idea is, okay, what does it mean that we have integrity and survivability of our system? Well, it means that during our computer forensics, we can prove that our system can survive from attacks without any true damages, meaning that we were able to keep our data confidential, meaning we didn't share our data with anybody. We can ensure that our data has integrity, meaning that data wasn't manipulated. We can also ensure that we have our systems available. We can prove non-repudiation, or if someone did something, we can prove that they're the ones that did it, and also authorization. So essentially, computer forensics, yes, is used in the court of law, but it also can be used to prove that our systems are correct, that anything you are accessing is doing what they're supposed to do. So I've been using very interchangeable words. I've been saying integrity or CIA triad. I've been using a lot of terms that people will recognize as cybersecurity concepts, cybercrime and so on and so forth. So I want to make a clear distinction between computer forensics and cybersecurity. So yes, they both involve computers and sometimes criminals, but forensics is all about that data recovery, the collecting information in order to analyze. It's not necessarily to do cyber crimes or to prevent cyber crimes. It's data recovery. While cybersecurity in this context for computer forensics, it means about defending or attacking a system. It is the cyber crime essentially. But I also would like to note that computer forensics is a subset of cybersecurity. It is a part of the same domain. It's just that I wanted to make sure that these are two very different concepts within this context when I talk about computer forensics. So since we're a part of the domain of not only computer science, but also law, I wanted to go into a little more of the legislation of what computer forensics specialists have to follow, because essentially, the computer forensic specialists, they have to follow the law. But since the law sets precedents and some precedents does change, that means that as specialists, we're in a constant state of flux. We should be able to adapt to what is standard and what is precedents set by, for instance, the US government in this example. So some legislations that allows the collection of data or prohibits the collection of data are the Wiretap Act and the Fourth Amendment and a bunch of other legislation. And so why are we following this legislation? Well, it tells us what we can and what we cannot do as computer forensic specialists. Let's take, for instance, the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment says we cannot investigate without a warrant. We cannot take personal items or information without a judge's approval. In addition, we also have the Wiretap Act, which is a little different. Instead of taking items, we're talking about prevention of intercepting communications without a warrant or a subpoena. All of these legislation helps us legitimatize why we're doing what we're doing, why we're investigating, why we need this information, this evidence. And we can see here that even thinking about the types of communication, email in general, email can be in transit, meaning I just sent an email. It can be stored on a home computer. It can be in a remote storage. It can be unopened. It can be opened, and all of these subsets of where the email is in time makes us need different types of requirements in order to access it, whether it be a warrant and a subpoena, and the statute in which we have to follow also changes. So this is why whenever we think of computer forensics, it's also law, because we have to make sure that our ducks are all in a row and that what we're doing is legal and what we're doing is right. Because if we don't, evidence can be suppressed or taken out of the court and not utilized during an investigation and can hurt us from prosecuting actual criminals. So let's get a little more technical here and talk about the steps that a computer forensics specialist would go into, the steps of an investigation. There is usually 7 steps to an investigation and a possible extra step of becoming the expert witness, which I'll talk about a little later. So first and foremost, we have our search authority. So previously I've been talking about warrants and subpoenas and the consent to search, because based off of the Fourth Amendment, we're not allowed to do that. We need what we would call like the pink slip, our little note card that says we are allowed to do this. Because if we don't do that, then our evidence, anything we've recovered, could be suppressed in court and prevent us from actually prosecuting criminals. There are times in which we don't really need a warrant or a subpoena or a consent to search, and these are very much specific circumstances, one of which is being during war, or another being anything that's life-threatening or threatens the well-being of others. So, in addition to that, warrants are very specific. What are we allowed to search and where are we allowed to search? So we must follow all of these constraints in order to do our investigation thoroughly, but also legally. Second of which, we need to ensure our chain of custody. So what does it mean, chain of custody? Well, let's break it apart. We have custody means that someone is of ownership of something. And there's a chain of this, meaning that if we do have evidence, we have to ensure that this evidence isn't tampered with by another person. So we're ensuring that chain of custody. So each time evidence changes hands or is changed to a different person, we are ensuring the accountability of the other person and making sure that if the chain is broken, that evidence obviously will be excluded because that we can't ensure that the person tampered with the evidence, but also we're making sure that we're recording and documenting our entire length of investigation. And documentations can be forms, tags, and reports. So another thing, I was talking about ensuring that that our evidence hasn't been tampered with, or whatever we've recovered, what devices or information we've recovered isn't tampered with. And this is done through imaging / hashing, or hash imaging. So imaging is basically creating a duplicate copy of our devices. So let's say we have a phone, for instance. Instead of utilizing that original resource, that original phone, in order to do a recovery, we would instead find an image of the phone or a duplication of the phone in order to do our investigation on that. And the reason is because if data, especially data on host space or devices, is very fragile and can be altered very quickly. Even by turning on a computer, we can alter memory by accident. So our imaging is making sure that if we do alter memory, we're ensuring that, oh, well, it's not the original evidence. We can always duplicate the original evidence, but we can never undo what we've done to the original evidence. And this is only, imaging is only for the digital evidence on devices. Ironically, whenever we think of networks or Wi-Fi, we actually want to investigate the original device, the original what happened. And this is this is just the way the investigation works. To go in a little more about hashing, hashing is essentially just an algorithm to get a unique hash value or a unique number to an image. So this is basically us proving that our device hasn't been tampered with. This is proving our integrity. So if we do have multiple copies of the image of the device, then they should all, after applying the algorithm, they should all result in the same hash value or the same number. And in computer forensics, this is also called digital fingerprinting. Sorry. Another step in our investigation is validating tools. So we have so we don't usually, for digital investigation, just open the phone and see a bunch of ones and zeros. That's not how it works. Usually we use software or other tools in order to investigate the device. But because we're using external tools, we need to validate that those tools are correct and are not altering our devices, especially if these are new tools to the industry. We have to make sure that these tools are trained for this purpose. It's used in order to collect a certain type of evidence. And this is basically just testing that something works. So this is testing that our tool works. And then our biggest part, this is the most important, one of the most important steps, in my opinion, in computer forensics, which is our analysis. We're using our skills, our tools, our experience in order to look at our data and interpret these artifacts, another word for data, and see if there's any strong facts or circumstances that we can use or with our context of like what the investigation is about in order to collect evidence. So in order to strengthen our facts and strengthen the story of that happened with the device, sometimes we link user activity with a computer. Sometimes we'll make a timeline of events of when you downloaded something or executed a file on your computer. Sometimes it's through when you deleted files. What are those deleted files? What does it mean? And breaking encryption and so on and so forth. And all else, by the end of the day, we should be able to repeat everything we have done in the investigation so far. And how do we know that our investigation has repeatability, be able to do it again and again and find the same evidence and find the same result, which will be done again in a court trial sometimes, is through our reporting, our documentation. So since us having this in our devices, since having this new evidence, essentially, and till we present in court, we have to record everything. So record what the chain of custody, who had what, when, where, why. We have to report that tools that we're utilizing, are those tools correct and validated? Are they the newest version of the existing tool? Or analysis, the steps through our analysis, what parts of the device we've looked through, everything is within this report. And this report allows us to do that repeatability and do things again and again and again. And that is very important. But also another thing is that we don't know who we're presenting. This is all about our audience. And within the court, sometimes our audience are not the most technically capable people. So computer forensic specialists, they create the report in such a way that it's able to communicate what we found on our devices without it being muddled by the technical jargon that we could utilize, like data and binary and so on and so forth. And our last step, well, sometimes our last step is possible expert presentation. This is us being our expert witness because we normally know a lot about computer forensics and we're able to be a witness and tell them, well, tell the court essentially what happened and present our knowledge in an average layperson's terms. And the outcome of a trial sometimes depend on how we explain the investigation in our reports and the evidence. So it's very important that we're able to explain our technical concepts to non-technical people, knowing our audience, of course. And so this is an example, essentially, of that report and document that we could create as computer forensics specialists. This one is from the US versus Christ. And as you can see in the second page, essentially, that I screenshotted, it was basically us explaining what happened, given a timeline of events. Hipple then took the computer to his home, where he began to go through to see what he could delete. After looking through a bunch of songs on a media folder, Hipple opened up a couple of video files depicting child pornography, and he freaked out, deleted the entire folder, songs and everything, and turned off his computer. So as we see here, this is basically us giving a timeline of events of what happened on this computer. And of course, the document goes more in detail of our evidence that we were able to recover from the device. And you can see more through the casetext.com link at the bottom. All right, so I'm going to stop the first part of this video here. The second part will get a little more technical. What tools are we utilizing? How do we know these tools are giving us evidence, and so on and so forth. So see you in part 2.